I would like to start, if you're ready. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm very delighted to have this session, to be able to be here with you today. It's about megacities and how technology will disrupt cities and how we can actually create new cities when it's very dense and we have emerging disruptive technologies. So I'm very happy to have here today amazing architects, designers, and smart city author that we will have actually a very exciting 1 hour. And I would like to ask you actually to listen very carefully to these presentations, and after each presentation, we will have public questions. So I would like actually to introduce myself, Katalin Gajas from Civic Tech Amsterdam. I actually have a startup incubator where I incubate startups. And these startups that I'm working with, I call them urban disruptors. And why are these urban disruptors? Because I really find it very interesting to change the cities. But my take on the smart city story is very much from startups. I really believe that if you have good tech startups, they can transform cities. And just to show you what kind of startups I'm working with, this is Strawberry Energy, you see. And they make a smart bench, and it's solar panel, solar energy powered, and you can recharge your phone. And these guys, they just actually brought this concept to democratize the access to electricity, because it's, they said that why would you need to go to Starbucks to charge your phone, whereas it should be much more
Уважаемые
functional
гости
that
Московского
you have such a band.
урбанистического
And
фестиваля,
this is also
в 14 часов 30 минут
so you have
состоится
sensors.
центральное мероприятие, мероприятие дня с участием главного архитектора Москвы Сергея Кузнецова на стенде «Чистый город» в центральной части выставки. Мероприятие будет посвящено концепции развития Москвы-реки. Ждем вас в 14:30.
And I have the concept to have a virtual incubator where we collect this kind of amazing minds and really disruptive startups. These are also other startups I work with, WePolitics from Athens and Hamburg, and they actually bring back to citizens tools where you can engage political debates. And faster in Belgium, they open up lots of data, employers' data, to have actually carpooling system. But this is just to demonstrate to you that why I'm very passionate about, and this is a little bit my background. And before I would like to open the session, yesterday I walked through Moscow, and yeah, and I saw this. Yeah, sorry. Okay, you maybe had a very quick snapshot about this picture. This picture was on a huge highway. It was very condensed. It was really lots of cars, construction, pedestrians. It was everything just too dense. And this was, to me, a very good opening, because I thought, okay, what would be the best way to achieve thriving technologies, and how could we make out of this? Sometimes you have intersections in cities that is actually almost painful to see what's happening there. And today, when I open the session, I'm opening this question: how would you make out of this dense and heavy situation the best? And I'm very happy. Actually, the picture came back. Yeah. I'm very happy to give the floor and to open this session today. And our first speaker, I would like to call on stage, and Sergei Kuznetsov. Please give an applause to him. He is the chief architect of City of Moscow. Please listen to him.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I have prepared a presentation which is called Modern Architecture and Identity of Moscow Architecture, and this is what deals with the image and recognition of the country, of the city, regardless of the country. And previously, architecture of different cities differed significantly, but these days we can recognize them by old structures, because all new structures are sometimes looking alike, and therefore every city mayor, and we know it from what is published and from our discussions, that the heads of the cities think about how to make their city unique or continue the tradition of uniqueness and to find it and kind of expand it. And the specificity of Moscow is that we are looking now for our identity, and we are trying to attract the attention to our beautiful city. And there are three themes in my presentation which are emphasized. First, we will speak about our work, our team, and Sergei Sobyanin invited me and my like-minded people into a team, and we are looking for a way which is quite promising for us, and we believe we have found this way, this new path. We organize different contests, architectural contests, and the first thing we arranged was an international contest because we couldn't oversee the fact that Russian identity was created by foreign architectures with the use of best international practices, talking in a modern language. It started before Peter the Great, a long time, and icons of Moscow, Kremlin, and Uspensky Temple were built by foreign architects, and sometimes they say that they were already lived for Russia for a long time. It wasn't so. They just came on purpose, and even on decline of their career, they didn't speak Russian. They were aliens, but still they created the iconic buildings of for Russia, and which are regarded as something very traditional and national. Therefore, attracting foreign best practices is a very popular topic, and we can use it trying to depart from similarities and find uniqueness, underscore the uniqueness of our place. And those international contests are just modern projects, and it was a Zaryadia project on the backstage, and we can now say that this is a Moscow architecture which comprises all kind of participants. You see the span, geographical span of participants, 24 countries, even more than 500 companies participate, and in gray we actually highlighted those countries which have been working in Russia for the last 4 years, who generated their ideas, and we had more than 44 those competitions, and I believe and there were much more smaller contests and bids which we didn't include in our statistics, because it's kind of massive event to attract the best brains and ideas, and finding out something exclusive became a regular thing for Moscow, and we are proud of it. And actually it is very helpful to find our proverbial identity, and therefore we can see that our Moscow main venues are being transformed, and we can report about some achievements. We have a number of very symbolic achievements. You can projects which have been implemented and commissioned, and those who traveled across the Moscow River can see a lot of new buildings and venues which were virtually completed. Zaryadye Park will be commissioned next year, and there is another site in the downtown. You can see its solution is quite in line with modern architecture, but it is completely woven from Muscovite styles and traits which are dedicated to landscape and nature, or some geometry which is very resembling of what we have in Moscow, and this kind of landscaping is something which explains why this project is unique for this particular place. Although it may look as if it is nothing very much traditional, and there are no immediate sites of domes or eagles or sculptures of our czars, but we don't have this. But still, there are a lot of things which make this this place integral for Moscow, and in order to do it, we actually sieved out a tremendous number of ideas and projects and to select an international team. Another interesting venue is Skolkovo. This land belongs to Moscow these days, and it incorporates a huge number of new products, and the issue of identity there was resolved in the similar fashion. We invited the board of directors, and this project is one of the latest ones, where it is for Sberbank. Sahih Hadid team won it, and you can see that this building is not that linked to Moscow identity, but still we can state that once this Skolkovo develops and the entire ensemble grows, we will have something unique, and it is in the Moscow style. It doesn't look to what we used to see for the last century, but still there is some coziness, and it's very recognizable, and it is still special for Moscow and Russia. And this is the Pushkin Museum. It's another project which looks quite modernistic, but still, after our analysis, we believe that once we compare with the neighborhood, which is not easy to instill in the historical buildings, we still create a certain new image of the museum. And this Moscow gallery, art gallery, it was a very difficult, challenging issue to decide which project is the best, but still we believe that this project is really looking as a Moscow site. This is another metro station. I understand that I need to be on schedule, and there you can see that everything which is symbolic and iconic for Moscow now can be actually placed on different collided with different ideas of architectures, and to do something which is innovative and new for Moscow. And we still hope that later on it will be recognizable as a Moscow project. Another point which directly relates identity, it's mass residential area. And it is not only landscaped properly, but it is very identical, and there are similar features there. And but you see, this is quite connected with this peripheral ideas, but still it is what makes Moscow recognizable. It's a tremendous amount of block of flats which are very similar and where we have the majority of Muscovites residing. But how to this identity, which is negative, to turn into identity of a positive idea, what will be still recognizable and typical for Moscow? This kind of considerations led us to creating this kind of district, and a program was born to remodel those massive apartment construction. And then we wanted to do it different from what you see on the picture. And identical with this negative sign is what we see on this picture, where we have absolutely identical buildings, and you cannot recognize where it is. You can just say it's somewhere here. And we understand that some other cities also have this kind of apartments, but not anywhere in the world at such a scale. Therefore, something shall be done about it. And in order to transform it in this city identity, this is what we are going to do. And jointly with this state planning committee, we designed the rules, the guidelines which we need to follow. And there we identify what is wrong for these buildings, what doesn't allow people to feel comfortable there. We worked out the rules, and this set of guidelines is easy to follow. But on the other hand, it requires certain efforts, and 10 house building combined works actually were involved, and they are shaping the first floors and facades of the building in a new way, and what creates an address for people, this identity of people and their linkage to a specific territory, what people can call this small homeland. And once again, this is the ground floors, and they're transparent. There are shop windows there, and it is good for the comfort of what we have in the spaces in between cities, between buildings. And there we see also the pictures. And this has been already commissioned. And you see it has very recognizable design, but also provides a high degree of comfort for those people who live there, and it was a significant step forward. And we turned this identity into something which is obviously funny and pleasant, although this picture shows that this is the set of some looking like elements, but still industrial, but at the same time it is not what we had before. Another example of residential spaces, and they are in the commissioning stage, and it is also what we call mass construction, with those millions of square meters which we built for our residents and across the country. But on the same time, we believe that this program is what we need, and it also enhances Moscow identity. And another example of what we have done, it is actually aggregation of the history, and this is the VDNK, or the exhibition of people's achievements, and this is a territory which is quite interesting and very popular, but not very well known internationally, but still very identical, and it is associated with the Stalin's period and ideology we don't share these days, but still, is it the ground to actually negate it? No. And there we agreed that if we apply modern technologies and best practices and approaches of the best architects to create new essence, and then we can change it. And I recommend everybody to come there and to see. And this architecture can be filled in by best ideas and practices. And as we did it with Art Shop with students, this is what we did with the international student group, where we had new ideas and new senses, and we working jointly with them on new ideas and which meet the current realities and makes our city more exciting, attractive on the international scale. This is the site where you can share your ideas. Thank you very much for your attention.
Really impressive. I think you are one of the person who really can bring a huge change in cities, and I was very happy especially to see the mass housing, because when you come from the airport you see these large buildings that are really scary, and I'm very happy to see these nice colors. I would like to have a question, and the question is related to what was the biggest challenge in the last 5 years you encountered during your work?
Okay, я на русском отвечаю, правильно? I speak Russian, yes? Still, yes? Okay, you have translation on your headphone.
Well, what is a challenge? And this is a question that I've been asked for very frequently. And the greatest problem that we are all facing and that we need to address is the huge inertia in the public's opinion, not just the inertia of the mind of the citizens of our city, but of any public authority. Any changes and any revision of formats always runs into, no matter how good the changes are, we always run into great public resistance. What we are doing here, what we are doing at this forum, when we tell people what we are doing, what we plan to do, this is our answer, our attempt to tackle this challenge. That's what I'm working for. Спасибо. Работа у вас очень
Could have maybe somebody has a question. Ah, yeah, there we have a question. Yeah, we have a microphone. Thanks.
Well, I have a question to ask of you. You said that historic identity, you gave us a number of examples. What identity do you put into your modern buildings, the buildings that you are building now? Well, today I believe identity that could be expressed very simply in a shape or in a color or in an element that we insert into a building and you immediately say it's a Moscow building. So such things no longer exist. You know, our profession has changed. The profession of an architect as a profession that creates visual images, so it doesn't exist anymore in this form. What we were taught 20 years ago at the university is hopelessly outdated. We cannot use this knowledge today anymore. So we need to understand how we put together a program for people's lives, for those people who will be inhabiting this building. So the building needs to respond to people's needs, to their expectations. And the reason why I spend so much time on the Zaryadye complex. It's not an area that would be immediately recognizable as an area of Moscow, but once you start using it, once millions of people start flowing in, you will understand it almost immediately that it's part of Moscow, part of its fabric. We need to learn to work with meanings through the use of our buildings, through the use of facilities. So I think what what we need to do, we need to find that meaning, to identify it, and then transform it into buildings, into areas. We are not working with machines. Well, in 5 to 10 years, this work may lose its relevance.
Big applause. And I really hope to see much more of your design and these beautiful futuristic buildings. And I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Okay, next speaker, I would...
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening, for Sergey. Our next speakers, we are actually going to New York, and I'm very, very inspired to introduce you a quite amazing project, the Lowline project. And what I like about their work, that they really have a transformation, a urban transformation. And this transformation consists of combining places, making hybrid places. And they make an underground park with solar illumination. And I'm really, really happy to have these pioneers on stage. We have James Ramsey from RID Studio and Dan Barash. Please.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, I'm James, and I'm here to talk to you today about the Lowline project. So, you know, we're living in this kind of unprecedented time right now in which our cities are expanding rapidly, and we have to deal with all the sorts of, I don't know, infrastructural issues, et cetera, that are suddenly confronting us. How do we have enough water, enough power, enough transportation, enough circulation, et cetera? And luckily for us, our technology is also advancing in pace with that. And so we're able to actually be innovative and inventive and actually look to technology to actually solve some of these issues. Another thing that, another aspect of our growing cities that we're looking at is how we can actually use technology to reinvent what we're thinking about public spaces, right? And so the Lowline is an example of this. In a nutshell, what we're doing is we are taking an abandoned, completely forgotten trolley terminal underneath Manhattan, and we're using an advanced solar technology to bring in natural sunlight into that space to transform it into a park underground. So just to give you a bit of context, the space itself is about 40,000 square feet, and it's underneath one of the busiest streets in one of the oldest, most historic neighborhoods in New York. It was abandoned in 1948, and it's basically just been sitting there in exactly the condition that it was abandoned in for the last 60-something years. It's under a neighborhood which is simultaneously one of New York's oldest neighborhoods. It's a sort of an older immigrant neighborhood, and also one of the neighborhoods that's been really kind of most neglected by the powers that be, and a neighborhood where we often lack a lot of the amenities that a lot of other neighborhoods tend to have. Just to give you a sense of scale here, it's at the foot of the Williamsburg Bridge, so it's literally the gateway to Brooklyn, and it's also quite large in size. To illustrate how much green space it has, here's a simple graphic. New York is not a very green city. We have Central Park, but that's about it. In particular, this neighborhood has even less green space than other neighborhoods in New York. Like I said, it's a historical neighborhood, but one that's been sort of neglected over time, and it's grown sort of decreasingly vibrant over the years, and in particular has almost no green public space. So the principle here is that we can use this new technology that we've created to actually mine natural sunlight, to actually condense sunlight down to 30 times the brightness of the sun, send it through tubes, almost like plumbing, down into the space where we then spread that light back out and use that to grow things. So we can actually take a space that looks a little something like this right now and transform it into something a little bit more like this. And so what we actually end up doing from a design standpoint is not only creating a public space where there is no more space, but also we're actually creating something that is simultaneously fuses the future of our cities with its distant past, where we can actually just kind of peel up the sidewalk to look into the history of New York City. Thanks. Nope.
All right, is that better? Okay. And let me also just say thanks again. It's been a huge pleasure for two New Yorkers to come and visit Moscow for the first time. Thank you so much for having us here. To just add to this, James introduced the concept of this underground park, and right now many of you may be thinking, is this technically possible? Is this socially valuable? And maybe you're even thinking, is this something that might have some value in a place like Moscow? The first thing that we did was to try to show people how the technology could work. So this is all the way back in 2012. We rented out a warehouse. We installed a version of the solar technology. James and his team designed this solar canopy and then drew natural sunlight into this otherwise dark space to show people how the lowline could look and feel. And to our happiness and amazement, over 11,000 people came and visited the installation. And so we knew that we were onto something, and this would be a popular concept that potentially could be even bigger than just this one location. We also saw very early on that ultimately this design was really about people. It was about inspiring young people, people of all ages, and also that there were a lot of cultural and social value to this idea beyond just the simple idea of invigorating a space. So one element that we're very proud of is that the Lowline has turned into a huge incubator for science education in New York City. It's actually, at this point, reached over 2,000 kids across New York City, getting them excited, a new generation excited about science, technology, engineering, and math. You can see some of the student models we've actually been able to showcase and really help deliver this idea that architecture is this sort of multidisciplinary field that actually requires a lot of understanding. So we're actually also very proud that we decided to build the Lowline Lab last fall. We knew we needed to do much more technical research into the solar technology to actually test the botanical and horticultural reality of actually growing plants underground, and also, again, to really test the social idea over a longer period. So we took over an abandoned building again just last fall. And we installed the solar technology on the roof. These are large heliostats that track the sun all day on an automatic motor that then reflects that light into this otherwise darkened space. So we're testing the solar technology, this advanced optical approach. We also worked with some world-class landscape designers and botanical experts to really look at what kinds of plants might grow underground. And then we installed a large exhibit. This is actually a beautiful photograph of one of our opening days, and you can see in the center beautiful natural sunlight coming into this otherwise darkened space, a live landscape that now has over 3,500 individual plants, 80 different individual species, plants that range from everything like mint to strawberries to tomatoes. And it's just an extraordinary thing to see. And we opened it in October, and since that time, we have actually had in the space over 70,000 visitors to the space. So this actually makes us one of the most exciting cultural attractions in our neighborhood within New York City. So what are the larger sort of stories and questions here when we're thinking about this underground park idea? First of all, I think the possibilities for youth development, youth education, and getting kids excited about actually just making science fun and turning this into something that can be social has really came to life in extraordinary ways at the Lowline Lab. It's also a beautiful and inspiring place. Many people and organizations across New York City have reached out to us to actually propose cultural ideas. This is actually a dance troupe made up of high school students that designed a dance specifically inspired by the Lowline. And they came in and one day provided this free sort of beautiful kind of weird dance. Here's a street fair that we had in partnership with local street vendors. The Lower East Side, if those of you are familiar with this neighborhood in New York, is home to some really extraordinary small businesses. And it was wonderful to see that we had 9,000 people come and visit this street fair on a Sunday, which tripled local sales for local businesses. Wellness activities. This is something that has been proposed to us, and we've actually sought out. Here we have a yoga event in the space itself, where over 75 people came and did yoga in the Lowline space. We've had meditation activities. We've had a lot of other types of things for people of all ages. So in looking to the future and thinking about how we can bring a little bit of additional nature to our city, I think the low line potentially represents this chance to really imagine the use of the underground in our large cities. It's a huge pleasure to share this with you in Moscow, and we'd love to hear any of your thoughts or ideas about how this might potentially work in a place like Moscow. Thank you.
Thank you. James, then it's really amazing work. Actually, I would like to ask a question because I think this is such a beautiful example of a real, tangible urban transformation. I'm very much interested in hydroponics. So when you have gardens on roof, and it's also with sensors enabled. And my question to you would be, do you think there would be a way that you can connect your underground beautiful gardens to these self-producing roof gardens?
Well, actually, a large component of what we're working with has to do with harvesting that sunlight and transporting it down, right? Yeah. So it's because of that, it's something that affects not only the underground space, but also the street level, and also the buildings around it, right? And so because we're actually specifically having equipment that actually corresponds to each of these different strata of the city's levels, it's very easy to envision something in which we can incorporate greenery, plantings, et cetera, at every single level, and have something that actually carries through the entire sort of stack of different heights throughout the city and the skyline.
Wow, great. And we were just, when we started, the big question is also, will you have there bugs and insects? And
well, actually, that's a great question, and the answer is yes. We've actually had all sorts of little animals in our exhibit already, the one that we built last October.
Yeah.
You know, there's beneficial bugs, which we encourage, and there's bugs that eat all of our plants. Like, for example, our mint got entirely eaten up, and so we had to import in a very special type of bug to eat the bug that was eating the mint, for example.
Genius, yeah.
But we have not had any mice or rats.
Mice,
like
okay.
saying.
That's the next stage. Yeah. Okay. I would like to ask the public, because I think it's so inspiring, just to have some questions and discussions. If anybody would like to ask questions for James and Dan. Nobody? Oh, yes, here we have a volunteer. Microphone.
I'm interested in the legal part of the project. How did you obtain permission? How did you obtain the permission to start the project? Do you own the space, or how the legal process looks like?
So how do you deal with the permission when you start such a project?
Okay, this is a great question. So the city of New York actually owns the site that we're talking about underground. And so we're actively in negotiation right now with the mayor of New York and his administration to transfer access to us. But much of our project has really been about acting as if we have permission to do it without having any kind of official response from the city. So everything that we've done so far, including the development of a long-term exhibition and social laboratory, we just went ahead and did, and sort of hoping and waiting for the city to catch up to us.
Thank you so much. And I think the next stage would be for you to think about how are you going to deal with publicity, because I think there will be a massive crowd of will visit you and they want to replicate it in other cities. So this is my last question. How are you going to be able to deal with publicity and visitors?
Yeah, so this is an important question. You know, I think the last thing that we want is for the space to feel overcrowded or too popular, actually. We know that the low line represents a lot of new opportunities for city residents, specifically in the wintertime. I know Moscow has a long winter as well. In New York, many New Yorkers feel sort of cooped up during the wintertime, so we saw record numbers of attendance to our lab in the winter. I think what's nice about our project is that we actually can manage and maintain the capacity and the number of people that are in the space at a given time, so we can maintain a certain level of security, stability, and ensure that we don't get overcrowded. I think that the larger question about sort of publicity for the project, since we've done this now for several years, we do have followers that are tracking our project, and we have a sort of a large mailing list of supporters and fans, and hopefully this will be a bit of a sort of a movement of supporters that will help get out the word and help with the good publicity to make this a very vibrant and exciting space.
Such a good work. Thank you so much. I'm looking forward to go and see the grasshoppers jumping around.
Actually, and I can even just say the Lowline Lab is open until next March 2017. So if anybody comes to New York between now and next March, you can come and see it for free yourself. Yeah. So I welcome you to come.
Such a good work. Thank you so much.
Когда мы говорим о городской трансформации, очень важно, чтобы были такие лидеры, которые понимают и как работает муниципалитет, и как работать с архитекторами. И вот и хочу представить такого человека, который огромное влияние оказал на меня, когда мы работали с идеями в Амстердаме. Это Антон Таунсен. Он из Нью-Йорка, и он как раз такой лидер, идейный лидер. Вы, наверное, читали его книгу «City Hackers», и это то, я всегда любил работать вот с такими людьми, которые внедряются в строительство новых зданий. Господин Томпсон. Здравствуйте. Итак.
A lot in the last month. So in the interest of fast-growing cities, I'm going to use some rapid prototyping methods and prepared what is kind of a sloppy presentation, but I used a new app to try to show you really that building smart cities is not something that you have to wait for your government or a big company to do for you. It's something that you can and should do for yourself. I was watching on the flight over here from New York the Steve Jobs movie. And, while I think Steve Jobs was a crazy, egomaniacal person, he really was a genius. And, every one of you, or probably half of you, have something that he created in your pocket. You've got one on your lap, and it has given you an incredible amount of power over the world to create and to share your thoughts. And this is really like what's at the essence of, I think, the other vision of the smart city that's not about, getting the traffic to flow on time or, optimizing security. It's about making a smart city that's more social, more fun, more beautiful, more human, and one that, you really define what it is. So here's where I started. So I was in Bahia Blanca, which is a second-tier city, maybe a third-tier city in Argentina. Not really a very interesting place. Not a lot of tourists go there. It's a petrochemical center. Basically, it's a town around a big oil factory. This is the main pedestrian street in the center of the city called Drago. And I took this picture from the window of the building from the second floor where the innovation ministry of the city government is setting up their new innovation center and their co-working space. And they want this to be like the place where open data and hacking, this is going to be their civic hacking center. And Argentinian cities, they're very progressive. They all have an open government, open data program. They're super into this stuff. They believe in bottom-up activism and open data and smart cities. But it's tough, right? Like they have a long way to go. So what I did was I looked at this and thought, how do we turn this plaza, this pedestrian plaza, into a smart plaza? What do we have to work with? What assets are there? What technologies can we start to put into place? And how do you start to activate it? and make it more of a smart technology-enabled city. So first thing to do is just identify like what's there to work with. So the street lamp posts. At some point in the last 10 years, somebody must have gone and put these lamp posts in. They're actually pretty cool looking. There's some design quality to them. I really thought they were very elegant. And cities all around the world are replacing their street lamps because there's huge energy gains to be had from replacing incandescent lights with LEDs. And there's a very good case to be made that the lamp post will be the infrastructure of the smart city. It's a great place to put all kinds of electronics, sensors, Wi-Fi, and it has electricity already. And so you see smart lighting is like one of the things that governments and companies all around the world are like, hey, this is the platform for the smart city. Philips in the Netherlands and Eindhoven is going gangbusters on this. General Electric in the United States is doing the same thing. So that's a great asset right there. We can use this as an anchor point for doing all kinds of stuff. It's also great because this is easily accessible to citizens, even without the cooperation of the city. The signage that all these small businesses along here have is another asset. We can hang things off of it. We can replace them. We could put screens there, as you'll see in a second. So that's like a site for architects and designers and content, potentially, to start thinking about, it's basically analog. How do we think about making it digital? And then there's these unobstructed rights of way through the site, even though the street's been filled in and made pedestrian. That was done to reduce conflict between motor vehicles and pedestrians. Well, the digital revolution means that the vehicles are going to get smarter, and they may be able to move through here, whether they're delivering packages or people, and be more safe. So we can think about reintroducing them through these corridors. So this is just the first glance looking at this place. So how do we take this incredibly dull, empty place and think about bringing it to life with smart technology? And then, of course, there's all the data that's being generated in this place. And, the city is generating all kinds of data all the time. It's just the routine, sort of what they call the data exhaust of life. So I broke these down into like businesses, citizens, and government. So, and this is just to give you like a visual anchor to understand like where in the city is data being generated. So these small businesses along here, they've got inventory that's probably being tracked by computer. They're getting deliveries that's being tracked by the delivery companies. They've got credit card sales transactions. They may be ordering stuff. There's a lot of data going on, even in the smallest business. Individuals, citizens, they're generating data just by moving through the city. Whether they're being tracked or they're tracking themselves, their demographics, their own, if they linger in a place and they're being tracked by a camera or a cell phone, they may leave a little bit of extra data somewhere, which is what that bigger dot means. Over time, like the way ants leave a trail and they follow the other ants, it may accumulate. So we can learn something about how people like to move through the city by following groups of people over time. And then government has tons and tons of data. They know what the inside of the structure of the building looks like. They know the history of the site. They know what's under the sidewalk, what's flowing there. All this data exists. It's very hard to see. It's accessible to different people, different times, different rules. But we can use it to program the environment, to understand it, to see it, to control it in different ways. And that's another big asset, right? And it's one that people are increasingly looking at and saying, wow, that may actually be the most valuable thing about the city. And it's clear, from this site, at least, that people were trying. They were trying to make these connections. This is probably my all-time favorite coffee shop name in the world. Wiki Coffee. I have no idea what that means. Does anybody have any idea what that means? Because a wiki, right, is like something anybody can edit. Does this mean like anybody can change the coffee recipe? I don't know. But they're definitely trying to connect the internet to the public space by calling it Wiki Coffee. And this is, in this not very digital, not very hip city, the place where people go to try to be part of the digital world and the technology world and the innovation world. So there's a hook there. People are trying. And they're broadcasting their Wi-Fi into this public place. The city is trying. They're launching apps. So this was, a real-time arrival. Cuando llega, when you arrive, app that is basically pulling real-time data from the city's bus fleet, which is why we were there to do a case study of this project. And trying to help people use the bus system better. So there's certainly a feel that this is something that people want. So what I was trying to do here was think, okay, well, what have people done elsewhere with technology to activate public space? Or what are people doing online that we can pull into the physical world of the city? So the Internet of Things. Again, no one really knows what kind of data in the city that exists now or that we could collect might be useful, but people are sure trying a lot of experiments. So probably the boldest and most free form, if you will, in the sense of like a jazz ensemble where there's no structure, it's just playing what feels good, is Chicago's Array of Things, which is a joint partnership of National Lab, University of Chicago, and Livermore National Lab, the University of Chicago, and the City of Chicago, that's creating a generic sensor pod to put in downtown Chicago, all over downtown Chicago, which you see here, this little pod. So using my paper app, this quick little proto sketching thing, I imagine, well, what if we use these lampposts as a platform for these sensor pods? And you can see the arrows, the green lines, bringing the data in. Maybe it's tracking how people move, so we can understand how people use this plaza, and measure when it's popular, and try to maybe create more activities for people when they're there, or track them off hours. Maybe we want to measure. This is a city that has big air pollution problems. Every single meeting we had, people were talking about the fear of pollution from the chemical plants. People have had serious health problems from this pollution. It's a constant battle. Should it be sensing the impact of the air quality on the plants and the people? It can be communicating with various pieces of the furniture, the trash cans. Are the trash cans full? Should they be collected? Things like that. We don't know. But you put the infrastructure in place, people can start to figure it out. Of course, the circles indicating free Wi-Fi. Everybody loves free Wi-Fi. I am so jealous that you have free Wi-Fi on your subways, your metro here. I wish you would come to New York, please, and install it there. This is one of my favorite things. There's a couple dozen cities around the world that have launched these city government dashboards that are websites that show you how well the city's performing on the targets that they've set for themselves. So, how satisfied are people about city services? How well is the city doing against the targets they've set for their own performance? I think it's great that they do this, but it's never in the place where you want it to be, You want to know what the performance is when you're standing in front of the trash can that's not been emptied, or you're in the traffic jam that's happening. And I think that information could be pushed out into the real world. So in the same way that we have status bars on our screens and our mobile devices, we could use these beautiful objects in the city as a kind of like status bar, and have them activated and light up to show the data about how the city's doing. Is the air clean? Is the traffic coming? Are kids doing good in school? So that we can start to talk about it and do something about it. People have already done this, but I think bringing it into the public realm. And then the third inspiration comes from a project I worked on about 15 years ago in Korea, where if you go to Korea, every building has tons of signs on it. Now they're all digital, they're all programmable, they're huge, but they all show different content. Each building owner shows what they want to show. But it would be very easy to plug all those signs into each other and show content, like we have here, where it's all integrated across the different buildings. And so, this is something we imagine. What if you treated this entire wall of buildings as a single screen during a festival, like the ice cream festival here in Moscow, and just big ice cream cone across the entire wall of buildings. At the end of the workday on Friday, something calming to help people relax and go into the weekend. Holidays, emergencies, you could show people how to evacuate the plaza. This idea of integrating the information space of the city, I think is technically very easy to do and would allow you to transform the space into something completely different. So, and then, I call it Snapchat Street, right? Like, why not let people use it as a canvas to share the moments that are happening in that social space and make it that much better as a public space? So the whole point of all this is these are just ideas that, I cooked up in 15 minutes looking at the picture of this place, taking technologies that are on the market now, easily accessible. Many of these ideas would require working with other stakeholders in the city, with city government, with property owners, with utilities, with nonprofits. But none of it's impossible. None of it's particularly complicated. Some of it costs a little bit more. But none of it requires waiting around for the national government or another election or IBM to come in and create a whole new infrastructure for the city. This is very tactical. It's in the spirit of the low line. It's good idea, don't ask for permission. Come in, show the power of your design, and sort of let people run from there and get behind the idea. And we don't do enough of this, I think, in the smart city, because people are scared of the technology and they think it's strange, and they think it's only the realm of Silicon Valley entrepreneurs to take control of it. So I hope you find some interesting ideas in there. Start building it yourself. Thanks.
Thanks, Antonin. It was really amazing, inspiring. When I saw your slides, I was...
Lasers.
Lasers.
Yeah, I didn't know we had a laser. I would have used it.
Oh.
Cool.
Okay. Just when we saw this Wiki coffee, it reminded me how nice it would be to have a Wiki smart city. That is also very much your concept from bottom up and from big data. What do you think? Do you believe in this concept? And who should, if yes, who should be organizing and orchestrating this kind of bottom up smart city movement?
Yeah, I mean, wikis are terrible things, actually, in the real world. Because they end up getting dominated by like a handful of people who are usually like the only contributors and become like very autocratic. Like wiki governance is actually not a good governance model for a city, in my opinion. But I think I think the best place is to start with like existing like democratic models and try to package these technology interventions in a way that fit into those, rather than what happens now often is we start with a technology where someone says, like, we've got to have this technology, let's try and find a way to ram it into the city, rather than identifying, we have this housing cooperative in Stockholm that can never figure out how to finance X, whatever it is that it's always having a problem with. Maybe smart technology is a way to solve that problem, because those people will not respond to a technology project. They think you're just trying to push your technology. They will respond if They think you genuinely have a new solution to their problem. And we've seen a lot more traction when people come at it with that problem-solving focus. So when I spoke the other day at the plenary session here, I said, you know, smart city advocates have to focus on problem-solving, partnering, and planning. And they have not done that. So problem-solving is you've got to create value immediately. The partnering is like, you can't be totally self-interested. You have to give and take with others to get done what you want to get done. Because cities are too big, and any technology is too big and complicated to do everything on your own. And planning, like you have to have a vision of what you're trying to create. Like you can't be like Uber or any of these guys and be like, oh, we don't know what the future looks like. We're just going to disrupt. Well, disrupt for what? Like, what are you trying to create? Are you trying to create a world of mass unemployment, right? Well, if so, you're doing a very good job, right?
And is there something that you would like as a kind of takeaway to give us when you advocate about big data, open data, when you encounter stubbornness, and is there a recipe that you use when you try to convince that this is the future technology, or is this something that you will...
I don't try to convince anybody that any technology is the future, because I don't think those things are inevitable. I think they're all choices. So what I try to do is get leaders to, and like key stakeholders to a point where they can say, they can look at a technology and say, that is not going to help me achieve our objectives for the city. Therefore, I want to get rid of that, or that is going to help me achieve our objectives, and I want to promote that. Or I need to turn that to a different purpose. And that's improving every year, but you know, for much of the history of smart cities, it just, they've looked at it and said, oh my God, that's so complicated and weird and new, I don't even want to deal with it. Or, you know, they just kind of step aside and let, you know, the engineers come in and do their thing. So.
Okay, thank you so much. Anthony was very inspiring. Please stay, because maybe I would like to open the stage for questions for Anthony, if you have any from the public. No questions? Nobody? Okay, then thank you so much. And actually, if anybody has any other questions regarding the session or from one of the speakers, it's still possible. If not, then I would really like to thank for your attention, that you visited this session. And what I actually would like to recapture when I heard these stories from the speakers, that there is one thing that can make smart city happen, and that's really to do real things, very tangible, impactful. When we saw the underground gardens, most important thing is to be tangible and to do real things. And I really appreciate the very well curated session, very well selected speakers. And thank you so much for being with us. And if you have any questions for the speakers, we're still around. And enjoy the rest of the Urban Forum. Thank you so much.